All right. Well, welcome, Chris Dallaire, to the SaveInvestGrow podcast. It's been a long time that we've been talking about bringing you on here, and we're here.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. First podcast, so I'm pretty excited to get into it.
This is going to make you very famous. So,
excellent.
Your entire lifestyle will change here on out, so it'll be good.
Beautiful. That's what I've been waiting for.
So we got Marc here, too. Your second podcast that we're on video. We didn't scare you off too much last time.
No, I think the key for me is going to be not to watch these afterwards.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So you and I met, Chris, when we were about 7 years old, and I don't think we would have pictured that we were sitting in a studio space talking about owning real estate for 12 years together now and all these different paths we've gone down. So kind of crazy that it ended up that way. We grew up in the same neighborhood in Manchester, and I don't think real estate investing was what we were talking about back then.
No, we were busy skateboarding and, doing things that kids do. But
but I feel like when I graduated college, like we started hanging out a lot more in 2008, 2009, and we started looking originally back then, but this whole recession thing happened back then. It kind of stunted our ability to buy a property at that point, but like that was still in the back of our mind for a while, and then this all came about in 2011 into 2012.
Yeah, we definitely had a little stint there where we were looking for properties. We were pretty serious, but opportunities didn't really come up. The market wasn't, the timing wasn't right for us, so we had a little bit of a break, but then things changed and the market changed a little bit and opportunities came up, a year or two later. So
I distinctively remember writing you the text message to bring you in. I don't know if you remember getting the text from me on this.
I do, yeah.
It was just kind of funny, and I've had this happen a few times in my life where I didn't really have it like premeditated. It just kind of hits me at a moment, and I'll reach out or send a message, and it's like you don't really realize how like what you're asking at the time, because it's like I didn't think like, hey, we're going to own this place all this time, but it. Yeah, I mean, basically at that point, we had the property under contract. I was trying to buy it with Frank at the time, and it was Frank had helped me with working on the Plummer Street property at my grandmother's house for a while, so that's how it all kind of came about. But it turns out banks like to have good income and good credit to loan you money, and we didn't really have the best of either, I think, at the point between Frank and I. And at the point, I was transitioning from leaving Edward Jones to working full-time for Cooptopia with you, Marc. So banks like to see stable income for 2 years, and they like having good credit. I had some money saved at the point. I had $7,000, which was needed to buy the house, which was basically all the money to my name at the point that I was going to roll into this thing. So I remember writing this text message being like, hey, I have this property under contract. I have all the money. All I need for you is to go on the loan with me.
Yeah, made my job pretty easy at that point. So,
was this your quick question? Was Pearl Street your first property, or did you guys own Plummer Street together? Did you own? I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, so this was our first home purchase for both of us.
Yeah.
We had never bought a property together. So it was March 30th, 2012, and it was. Plummer Street came a little bit after. I partnered with your father on that one. That was November of 2013. We ended up buying that one. But yeah, with that said, it was all brand new to us. So basically, story of how it was off the market. I was working at Edward Jones at the time, and Greg basically came into the office one day. A water heater had gone out, and he was like, I'm sick of it. I'm done with owning real estate, and I need to get out of this place. And I was like, I am interested in real estate. And, basically it was a friendly sale, put under contract, but it took a long time. It was like 8 or 9 months because we didn't know what the heck we were doing.
Yeah, it's kind of funny now if you flash forward really quick. I think we have a little bit better sense of what he was feeling at the time, but I'm sure we'll get to that. But it's kind of funny now just to look back, and we were so excited, and we're like, how could this guy want to just get rid of a property? And once you get into it, you start to see kind of, behind the curtain a little bit. But I think it's been worth it for sure. Yeah,
I think that going into probably this past November, we could say that the good far outweighed the bad. We definitely, this past November, I think that you and I are finally leaning towards selling the property after 12 years. But with that said, 99% of the time. Maybe 1 month out of the year we'd have like one bigger issue, but for the most part, the good outweigh the bad. But let's start at the beginning of it, though, because I feel like I was kind of thinking through in my drive here of like what that first year was like, what those first few months were getting into it. And we used the money that we had to down payment get into the place. And then I negotiated with Greg to get some money back at closing. So we got $10,000 back, and we used that for the first floor. So basically, right before closing, I wasn't planning to move in. The plan was just for you to move in, and I was living at my grandmother's 2-family. But then, like the day before closing, the third floor tenant just like left.
Right.
So all of a sudden, now I had rent due one place. We had a mortgage due at this new house we were buying. So we decided that you were going to go to the first floor and I was going to go to the third floor, right?
Yes. Yeah. And we had there was one tenant on the second floor when we bought the place. Little bit of a nightmare tenant, I would say, but I think because we were so kind of new to the whole thing and kind of nervous about finances and everything, we let them stay. We didn't want to change anything. We didn't change rent or anything, and just kind of dealt with that for a while. But yeah.
Yeah, we were 25, 26 years old. I would say that, we're still pretty early in our career. I don't think that, there wasn't literature, there wasn't house hacking, it wasn't a big thing at the point. It wasn't, none of our friends owned real estate like this. So we were kind of like doing new things. It was
blazing
kind of
the trail.
Yeah, it was kind of exciting. And I distinctively remember taking a real estate investment and finance course in college, and the idea of owning my grandmother's house, like I just couldn't believe the idea that I can live in one apartment and some other person can rent it and then they can pay the mortgage for me and I could live there for free. Like, why wouldn't anyone else be interested in doing that? So that's like all I had in my mind. It's like just leveraging that situation. Like, it's still providing a good place for them to live, but it was just like a numbers game.
Yep.
But yeah, it was, so that was earlier on. So we got into the place, but then you basically moved into a work zone. I remember you having like a taped off section in the living room that you were living in, and it was like a giant work zone.
Yeah, I'd say, the early days, it's definitely, I think the one word that comes to mind is sacrifice. It helps, helps that I'm the kind of person that doesn't really need a lot. If I have a good desk set up with my computer and a strong internet connection, I'm pretty happy. But yeah, you're exactly right. Pretty much we taped off one room, got one room relatively comfortable, got it all, plastic divided and separated from the rest of the house. And then the rest of the house basically became a construction zone for several months. It's actually funny. We had to do a full renovation on the bathroom, and it kind of worked out really nicely that person on the third floor moved out, because for probably about a month and a half, I had to go up to the third floor every time to use the bathroom, to take a shower. So yeah, that was a pretty interesting time.
Yeah,
for sure.
Steve, you were on the third floor. Right?
I was on the third floor, but I don't know if I moved in
right away.
You hadn't moved in
yet. No, you hadn't moved in yet. There was a month or two where it was just vacant.
Yeah, because I was renting an apartment from my grandmother. I was actually renting the apartment I grew up in from my grandmother, and it was kind of I wanted to leave her in a good situation. I was kind of, taking care of the house, being there with her. So I think my brother ended up taking my spot at the house, and then I ended up going over there. But yeah, it was kind of everything, with the tenant moving out, giving notice. Like, here we are about to buy a house. Like, we were forecasting having 2 apartments coming in, and all of a sudden, like, rent was only coming in for 1. Yeah. So it was kind of our first taste of like the volatility and uncertainty that sometimes comes with real estate.
Quick question. Did the second floor tenants, did they mostly like pay off your mortgage at least, or mortgage and taxes, or how did that work financially with that change?
I just reviewed the numbers on the way in. Okay. So I believe our mortgage payment when we first started was about $1,627 a month, and we collected $850 a month. So basically, when I got in, and it was both of us, you contributed $400, I contributed $400, and then we had $850 coming in from the second floor tenants. So $400 something bucks a month for an apartment's not too bad, right?
Right, absolutely.
I was listening to that this morning, and I'm like, man, like. What the heck?
Yeah, right. Can we go back?
Yeah, right. Like, it's like, crazy. Like, $2,000 a month's a typical apartment now, so it's crazy.
And that's one of the big benefits, for the listeners, if you're looking to get into this, purchasing a multifamily, if you plan and you can live in it. a lot of the benefit comes from just the reduced monthly expense, right? A lot of people think, oh, I want to get into real estate to make a bunch of money, but sometimes it's just not spending a lot of money is really the big benefit. So, for that first year, it was tough with all the renovations, but eventually, the place was renovated, it was comfortable to live in, and the tenant was still paying half the mortgage. So, you end up in a decent apartment for, $400 or $500-$600 a month, and that's a big benefit for sure.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot, and now, after, as the years have gone by, like real estate investing has gotten very popular, and there's, all these stories of these young investors that have all these properties and have done all this stuff, and it almost makes it seem like it's not attainable. But even just having like 1-2 family and just living on one side and collecting rent and leveraging rental income to pay the mortgage instead of using your own earned income, like it just does so much for your personal cash flow situation.
Yeah, and then you add the taxes into that, so you can reduce your taxable income. And, that's really big. So yeah, it's pretty huge.
Yeah, the write-offs and such are really good. And yeah, basically, the same apartment that we rented for $850 in 2012, we could probably get upwards of $2,000 a month right now.
Yeah.
Right now we're getting $1,500 a month for that. But because there's been such a low supply for apartments these last few years, none of our tenants have wanted to move.
Right.
And because we bought the house at the price we did, we don't need to charge crazy rents for it to cash flow. So it's kind of a nice situation that way too. The same house that we paid $200,000 for, we were just thinking we might be able to get $550,000 to $600,000 in this market right now for that same house. So it's beautiful of just getting into assets and letting just the time value of assets and inflation and appreciation all kind of work in your favor. It's just getting in it. You have to initially take that risk that we did.
Yep.
I find it interesting also just going back and just how we scraped it together. I think when we got $10,000 from the seller to do the work, it was like, oh, we'll be able to do the whole apartment. Well, that's a lot of money, right? And it went pretty quick.
Yep.
And we ended up learning the value of using Home Depot credit cards.
Yeah. Interest free for 12 months, baby.
Yeah, and I think we did the cabinets with that and got all the materials. And what's beautiful with an asset that earns income, it's like you can use it, put it in place, and then get the rental income to pay it for you instead of your own income again. So that's kind of where we've kind of got that first taste of doing that.
Yeah, and it helps also doing your own work if it's possible. A lot of times that's a little bit of a trade-off of time for money, right? So it takes a little bit longer when you're doing it yourself, but you're going to save a lot. And we had my dad to help us a bit in that situation as well, which was really helpful for some of the heavier lifting. But yeah, I think that was a good move on our part to do that.
Yeah, so we basically, you fast forward through the years. So we got through that first hump there. We got the second floor. We started every couple years, started getting new tenants in place. The rent started going up. Maybe we should talk about some of the bad things we faced. 'Cause we had some our fair share of things. I'd say that again, the good far outweighs the bad.
Yeah,
we've had it 12 years, but we had the lawsuit with the property management company we tried to put in. We've had pipes burst. Mm-hmm. We've had the washing machine let out in the third floor and take out the second and first floor. We just did, and what I mentioned earlier in November, we just did a lead paint abatement. That was probably the biggest thing we've had to deal with.
Yeah, by far.
But I would still say, despite all of that, again, all these that I'm rattling off happened like once every other year or something. It wasn't like this was happening every year. But through all that, for the most part, the rental income that came in paid for it, or we used the equity from the property to pay for it. We weren't using our own money to do all this work.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those things, if not all of them, are sort of just kind of the unforeseen things that happen that you can't really predict. But I think one of the things that we did that limited our headaches is probably being really strict and thorough about who we rent to. So we've always had a pretty thorough process in terms of background checks, credit checks, kind of the interviewing process, the walkthrough process, to make sure we have a really good feel for the tenant. And I think that's paid a lot of dividends for us. We haven't had a lot of unnecessary turnover. We've had no evictions. We've had no nightmare tenants that have really caused us a lot of headaches. So I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that people they like renting from us because like we are very open and transparent and accessible. Like we text them regularly. Anytime that an issue does happen, like we respond as quickly as possible. So it's, you kind of buy yourself the benefit of the doubt. Like when things do come up, like they are understanding of like, hey, we're getting this done as quickly as possible. And I think people, they've stayed because of that too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we're not, like you mentioned earlier, we could raise the rent a bit to be up with the market, but we're not super aggressive about that. I think we recognize that when you have a good tenant that treats the place well, that's relatively consistent, it's not worth rocking the boat and trying to, squeeze every last penny. You're definitely going to end up with more turnover and more headaches. So you might make a few $100 extra a month, but it may not be worth it for the additional turnover.
Right. Yeah. It's a fine line there. It's like you can fully squeeze and monetize as much as possible, but maybe you end up having turnover every single year.
Right.
I will say that I distinctly remember having a conversation with you, Mark, about your place, the two-family you have with Tim, when you guys had a vacancy. And I remember you guys being a little stressed out about having a vacancy. And for the first time, this wasn't really, at first, when we first bought the property, we didn't want vacancies, right? We were scared of vacancies. We wanted rental income coming in. But over time, rents tend to go up. And it's much easier to have a vacant apartment and then set the price that you want to market it for versus trying to raise rent on current tenants. So the switch in my mind was I started to look forward to vacancies as opposed to being afraid of them.
Right. And
that's what happened with you guys. We kind of came up with that little system to get them tenants in there and such. And I feel like that kind of happened for you guys a couple of times too. You had a vacancy and it's like, all right, well, here's your opportunity. You can kind of take a look at what the market is. And I always try to, when we've had vacancies, you want to like deliver value, right? Like I kind of take a look at like 3 or 4 comps for apartments and kind of underprice ours a little bit so it feels valuable and that tenants are going to be happy there and want to stay there for a while. Yeah. And I feel like that's happened for both our places.
Yeah. I think the other thing too that we found is it was nice having a chance to get in there and do some of that work. So, when somebody leaves and you have that vacancy, sometimes, you'll lose a month of rent, but the extra rent you get from bringing it up to about market price will easily cover that. Plus, again, you can get in there for a few weeks, do a bunch of work that you couldn't otherwise do if people were in there all the time.
Which is a great point. Actually, kind of brings us into the lead paint issue. We've had a first floor tenant that's been there for several years now, which on the one hand is good, but not having that opportunity to go in and kind of do some of that maintenance work. Normally we would repaint every time we switch out a new tenant. And not having been able to do that for a few years, we ended up with that lead paint discovery that may never have happened if we had been able to continue, putting fresh coats of paint in there. So that's kind of an interesting point.
Yeah, and it's to any property built before 1978, it's a very real
common
risk, and it's something that you should be cognizant of when you're buying a property. But it's also something that you don't want to like go look and find either.
Right.
It's something that you don't necessarily. When you buy them, the previous owner hasn't likely had tests done, so you're just kind of hoping that you don't run into it. And you only really run into it when there's abrasion, door jams, windows, when there's chipping, flaking, at the exterior. When we bought the property, we used an FHA loan, and they required all the exterior paint because it was shipping to be repainted. But that's the only thing that we had to deal with, and it passed all the inspections sent. So it's like you don't know until it becomes an issue.
Right. Yeah. And every 3 years we have our COC inspection, and everything seems to pass. I mean, occasionally you get the the smoke detector here and there that needs to be done, or hand railings that they want to be up to a certain code. But yeah, everything seems to pass. So we really didn't have any idea until that happened. So.
Yeah. So that's been quite the process. So we are nearly complete. You were sending some text messages this morning, and I didn't know you knew Spanish so well.
Yeah, I mean, Google is pretty good for that. So.
Yep. So with that said, hopefully we'll have that all lead safe certified pretty soon, which will be great to have, because that's been probably the most arduous project we've had to, we basically between that and we had to build the 3-story deck at the same time. So basically I'd say from like October, November, like all the way through until, into January, it was almost like every day we were doing, it was a job.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But that's been by far and away the most we've done. And we've done some. We've put on a roof, we've done a driveway, we've done all the apartments. So like we've run into a lot. I suppose this would be a good time, so basically talking about the turnover and such between tenants makes short-term rentals much more attractive. So maybe we go into how we all started working together at this point would be good. So one of the big attractive benefits of real estate is also, and this is how a lot of wealthy people, billionaires do this. So when you earn income, you get taxed more. But when you take loans against or equity against either real estate or stocks or something, it's not taxable income, right? So this was our kind of first taste of it. We did a line of credit when we did the roof job, but this was the first time we did a cash out refinance. It was December of 2020. So at the time, our property was worth, I think, $450,000 or $480,000, and we owed like $100-something thousand at the point, and interest rates were historically low. Yeah. So we basically were able to, it was kind of almost too good to be true. It was like we could keep our mortgage payment almost exactly the same, and we were able to take out almost $100,000 tax-free. Yeah. And nothing really changed with the cash flow in the property, and that gave us money to, we didn't really have a property identified or anything at that point, because you and Tim just did the same thing. I think you referred us to the lender. You guys just took out money from your two family just to have it for anything that could be on hand, right? Yep.
Same scenario where our, the interest rate came down from what we were paying enough where it pretty much our monthly payment was about the same, but we had all this extra cash now in our pockets, like you said, tax-free. So it was kind of a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think in our case, what happened was we had that line of credit you mentioned, and we were paying, $300 or $400 a month on that. And when we were able to do the cash out refinance, we were able to pay off that line of credit, which got rid of that payment. And then the increase in payment for the for the cash out refi was lower or similar. And so we ended up with really no difference in payment, but a bunch of cash to then go look for another project.
Yeah, and at the same time, all three of us had worked together briefly back in 2010. And I think I wanted to touch on this too. Is I've mentioned I've known you, Chris, since we were about 7 years old, and we've been good friends, but we weren't best friends either. We saw each other every now and then, but we've always kind of had a good, respectful relationship. And then Marc, you and we met in 2009 or 10, I believe.
10, yeah.
When you and Tim were buying the lawnmower at Sears, sold you guys the great lawnmower, and got a deal for you guys.
Maybe tell the audience who Tim is. Tim's a mutual friend.
So Tim was a college friend of yours, but he was my high school teacher. And we had a good relationship together, but I feel like it might have been that lawnmower experience where you guys were needing help with sales and marketing, and that's how I got pulled into Cooptopia with you guys.
Exactly.
And when we were starting Cooptopia in 2010, we needed help designing the voucher, and that's where you came in, Chris, and kind of helped design the voucher for customers to redeem on our site.
Yep. Yeah, that was a fun little side project, and that was cool to kind of get in the mix with you guys on that.
Yeah, but I think that was pretty much the only time you guys had really had any interaction, right? So this was...
correct.
So we're talking about a 10-year gap between 2010 and 2020. Really in the 20, it was around December 2020, and then we bought the Burke property, I think April of 21.
Yes.
April 28th. So in that span, you guys had your cash, you and Tim, and then we pulled out our cash from our property. So then you and I kind of started having conversations, Chris, about potentially looking at other properties. But then I was also talking with Marc as well. So it ended up just being like I was having the same conversations with basically both of you. And I'm like, we just all need to get on a call or something, and just maybe we could all work together on this, right?
Yeah, pooling resources, that's a good approach a lot of times. So that made sense.
Yeah, so we at that point we started looking in earnest, and we were not looking in Vermont at all. We were looking for multifamilies kind of in this area around Greater Manchester, and we had this grand spreadsheet running all these different comps. But I distinctively remember, I think you sent an email on like a Friday afternoon. It was like 4:00 or something of this.
Sounds right.
This property in East Burke, and I remember like seeing the picture, and it was I think listed for 200. Was it set? Did it drop from 275?
I think.
That sounds. Yep. And then they dropped it to I think 260. But yeah, right around
something like that. And I
range,
just remember thinking, like, this place looks nice. Like, it looks nicer than what should. It doesn't seem like to match the price for what it, like, at least from the outside.
From the outside,
yeah, the inside needed some work. And this was still COVID times, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's northern Vermont. Just so prices were a little different than what we're used to in southern New Hampshire.
Yep.
It looked attractive.
It looked nice, but we weren't looking for short-term rentals. We weren't looking in Vermont, but it was just kind of like that text I sent you on Pearl Street back in 2011 or 12, Chris. And it was just like I remember us emailing and texting throughout all that weekend. And I think we put an offer in like that following Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
It was pretty quick.
And yeah, what was crazy too, what I always tell people during COVID, if you remember, they wouldn't let out-of-staters come in and physically look at a property without having an offer already on the table.
Right. And it was kind of blind. We had to have it under contract. The first time we saw it, like, we were under contract to buy it. We were doing our inspection. Yeah. That's the first time we went and saw it. I think it was end of February of 21, we went in, and it was kind of funny because you couldn't really get the vaccination or anything at that point. So we were kind of like rebels, like going in, like to go look at this property, and we were crossing state lines to go look at this, right? Yeah. And but it was probably one of the first houses that, for me personally, going in, it looked better than the pictures. Like when we went in the basement.
Yeah, the basement for sure, especially having owned a property for several years that's, from early 1900s, and you've got the stone foundation. And this house, I think we saw the age on it. It was even older. Yeah. So I fully expected to go down there and just see a nightmare, and to see that they had completely rebuilt the foundation, all fresh cinder block and with higher ceilings was really surprising, and a really nice surprise for sure.
And the heating system just failed, right? Like right before we put an offer, so they put a brand new heating system in. Like it was so pretty, like all the plumbing run down there.
Yeah,
and
that was nice.
All the appliances are new, and the cinder block foundation, it was dry. Yeah, it was the opposite of our Pearl Street basement. Yeah. It was so pretty.
But that was definitely a calculated risk. It's 2.5 hours north from where we live, so it's definitely not, local. Needed a lot of work, obviously, when we went and did that walkthrough. The kitchen was tiny. It was an unusable bedroom right off the kitchen. 400 square feet of space that looked like it had a lot of potential, but really was not usable, where it was. But I think you might have sold us, Mark, on the mountain biking aspect, right? Because that property's right in the middle of a huge network of really popular mountain biking trails. So I think the wheels started turning, and we started thinking about the short-term rental potential and the draw that the mountain biking had, and I think we realized that could be a great opportunity and was worth the risk. And obviously, being in COVID, the competition was not nearly as strong. Not a lot of people looking to buy properties or dealing with the whole issue of not being able to go over the border. So kind of a lot of things had to come together for that deal.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, exactly that. And it was a fixer-upper, right? So you couldn't really see it, and it was a fixer-upper. So that pretty much scared a lot of people away. Yeah. And having you, Chris, when the real estate agent, was going around with his iPad, and because I think Steve and I don't have nearly the experience you do, so we wouldn't really know exactly how comfortable we should be looking at stuff. So, that really helped, having your sort of background in renovation kind of work, and just kind of knowing what you're looking for. And
that was our tour, right? We got like this Microsoft Teams like FaceTime kind of like tour of the house, and the agent was really good though too, because he's an investor himself too, so he was pointing out like all the bad spots pretty good for us too.
He was a tall guy. I remember him showing us that his head's like almost hitting the ceiling in one of the rooms with his camera, like doing a selfie. Like, it was kind of an interesting process.
Yeah. He definitely was. He was not selling us the place. He was pointing out like what was wrong with it, which was really appreciative when we were going through it. But your experience at Pearl Street, living in a work zone, really paid off here too, right? You made talk about sacrifice for Pearl Street. You were living up in a work zone in Vermont for like you went up for like 5 or 6 days and you would come home for like a day or two.
Yeah,
right?
I got into a pattern. I'm really lucky with my job being fully remote. I can pretty much do my job from a laptop, and had flexibility with the company, which was nice. So I kind of got into a groove of pretty much I would go up every Tuesday night. Then I would work on my day job during the day. And then, nights and weekends, pretty much I would work on the house, and then, come back Saturday night, Saturday afternoon, spend a few days at home, and then go back up again. So, but again, it worked out for me. I don't need a lot. So as long as I had, had the laptop, had the internet, had what I needed to work, and I feel like I kind of do a little bit better under that kind of pressure when there's sort of like a job laid out in front of me, and it's kind of like make or break, and it has to get done. I kind of like being in that situation. I think it brings out the motivation and the hustle. I think when you get too comfortable, sometimes it's easy to just kind of get into more of a relaxed situation. But it's kind of nice to have that goal, and a lot was riding on it, so it was really important to get it done. So I kind of enjoyed it, honestly. It was a bit of a sacrifice, but it was nice to kind of be in that situation and have to get it done.
Yeah, because we were up against, obviously had to start paying the mortgage and whatnot with no rental income coming in. So there's definitely some pressure, and like, all right, how quickly can we get this ready to rent? And it was a big project. So you did that for at least a year, right? That was about 12 months?
Yeah, it's funny looking back on it because it's easy to be kind of overly optimistic about, how long it's going to take. And I remember having conversations being like, oh, yeah, I think maybe mid-October we should be done. And then there we are, 4 or 5 months after that, still finishing things up. But, that's just how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite the project. We bought it April 28th of 2021, and we didn't start renting it on Airbnb, I believe, until June of 22.
Yeah, June was the first one.
So it was a project, and, something that was nice about buying a multifamily with rental income is, like, you can offset that mortgage payment. But another thing that Marc found that was really interesting was Hip Camp. Right?
Yeah,
we had,
that's true.
So we basically, we bought it, and we found Hip Camp, which is like an Airbnb for campers. Correct. So as we were working on the house, that springtime into that summer, we started having RVs and tenters stay out behind the house, and we were getting rental income to kind of help offset the mortgage.
Yeah, again, the bike community, there's a lot of vanners, kind of the van life people, and the location of this property, to the trail network and to downtown. It's about a half mile flat.
Yep.
Outside of downtown. So it's kind of like private, but you're close enough where you can actually walk or bike downtown. So, yeah. So the property has a barn in the back, and it's got a bathroom. And that was also kind of key, I think. A lot of the hip campers, people that are in the van, they saw that we had we actually had a flush toilet in that barn that they could use, and so they really liked having that option. And again, you're just right in the center of the Kingdom Trails up there in East Burke. So
I don't think you can emphasize that enough with a short-term rental. The location drives everything. You could have the nicest house, but if you're not on the beach next to the water, or in our case, which was unique, is Kingdom Trails, for those who aren't into mountain biking, is like the mecca of mountain biking in our area. I mean, there's international races there. People come down from Canada. People come from all over the country. When you go in this little town, there's license plates from all over the country, and people are riding bikes that are more expensive than my car, and people come from all over the mountain bike in this town. So the location of our place, and we it's really nice. I mean, we'll post some before and after pictures in the show notes for this. So, I mean, Chris, the work that you drove, like it, night and day. We took the biggest weakness of this house was the kitchen. It was this tiny little kitchen, and the way we flipped it into it being the biggest strength of the house and how open it is beautiful, but the location is the number one driver for short-term rentals.
Yeah, especially to get the numbers, I think, to work. You can obviously command a much higher rental rate, having kind of a prime location. But yeah, you actually brought up something kind of interesting too. I remember because this was during COVID, and there was a little bit of risk too because the border was shut, if you guys remember. And I remember reading that about 50% of the people at Kingdom, because we're only, probably an hour from the Canadian border. And so about 50% of visitors to Kingdom Trails come from Canada, and the borders were shut at the time. And we didn't know when they were going to reopen, and so that, there's a little bit of a risk there too to say, whenever our place is ready, are we going to have enough renters coming in? But it ended up working out. I can't remember the timing. I think that first year in 2022, June, which is kind of the start of the mountain bike season up there. I think they had just opened, or it was kind of right around that time, I think, when they opened up the border again. So
it worked out.
Yeah, unfortunately, Airbnb does translation for French.
Oh yes,
we have. I'd say, half of them don't speak English, right? Our guests, and fortunately, we can translate through Airbnb, and that's been interesting. And we've had nothing but good experiences with the guests. But we didn't have an Airbnb experience. We didn't have short-term rental experience either, right? So that was another risk that we took on. I think just one thing I want to point out that I've kind of seen from our experience with Pearl Street and now Burke is you have to kind of have faith in yourself to put yourself in the situation and trust that you're going to figure it out.
Exactly.
Like we've been in a lot of situations for the first time between the three of us with, starting Cooptopia or Pearl Street or now Burke. And it's like we just kind of put ourselves in there, and it's like, hey, other people have done it, so can we. We can learn. Let's trust ourselves. We'll problem solve and figure it out to make good decisions, right?
Exactly. As long as you have a few things lined up that you know are good, you're going to figure out the rest. So we knew the location was really good. Like you mentioned, obviously, we're right in the middle of an extremely popular, network of mountain biking trails. We also have the ski mountain, 3 minutes away from the house, right from the porch. You can see a beautiful view of the mountain. So we knew there was going to be some draw for that, some draw for the mountain biking. And the rest, you just have to have faith that you're going to be able to make it work. And that paid off for us.
Yeah, that was huge. And, I feel like the other big benefit with short-term rentals that we touched on with long-term rentals is getting in there and cleaning it all the time, right? That's been really nice in between guests and such that, you have to have a really good cleaner with a short-term rental. And, we fortunately have built a pretty good network. We have a good cleaner, we have a good handyman, and we have a good contractor that we rely on. We have a good plow guy. We've kind of built a network. It's a small town, so everyone kind of refers each other. So that's worked pretty well for us. But we are over 2 hours away. And it's I distinctively remember those first few guests just watching the camera and just waiting for the guest to burn our house down and not having any idea what was going to happen and just freaking out all weekend. But now it's just another weekend, more people there. It's all good, right?
Yeah, I think getting a really good, trustworthy cleaner is probably, that's task number one if you're out there and you're planning on getting an Airbnb that you're not going to, physically manage and clean yourself, is really be thorough about finding a good cleaner, because that has, over the months, just getting that trust and that faith built in our cleaner. Shout out to Melissa if you're listening. She's been really, really great for us. That's been a night and day difference. And now we've got that trust. We hardly even have to really think about it that much anymore. So I think that's been huge for us.
Yeah, and I think it's only it's built. So we bought it April 21. We got it started rented June of 2022. And then last year, we, again, were looking to grow and reinvest further. So we were looking that barn out back. We were thinking about turning into a separate short-term rental. And then we randomly get this message through Airbnb from this guy named Alex, who is from the area, and he wanted to rent our barn and turn it into a mountain bike shop.
Yep.
And it was perfect timing, right? We were just going with the town and getting approvals and going through that. And we ended up renting to him. And, that ended up being a pretty big project. We had to change, we did septic work, roof work on the barn.
Yep.
And, but he's fit the place up. He's a professional mountain biker in the area, so everyone knows him, and he's got this awesome shop out back now. And now we have a new tenant out back who's, paying us monthly. We have a new set of eyes looking at the property for us, and I feel like we just hit 1 year with him, and that's been really good as well.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, the timing, because I don't know if you remember, but we had actually walked with some contractors through.
Yeah.
We'd gotten approval from the town, had the design.
Yeah, we had drawings all set up on what we were going to build and everything.
Yep, turned the barn into an ADU. You know, the zoning code up there allows you to have one ADU. in the zone that we were in. So yeah, we were going to convert the barn, but then I think it was I don't know if it was a day or two after we walked with the contractors. We got that message from Alex. So yeah, it was, and I think too, a lot of our renters like having, like going back there and talking to Alex about servicing their forks and their rear shocks on their bike. And so it's just kind of a good connection that he has with our renters. And so it's worked out really well.
Yeah, I think it's another thing that's cool to keep in mind is that a lot of times, you come at this from a perspective of, what are we going to get out of starting a business or buying a property? What do our numbers look like? What are we making each month? But I think mostly through the Airbnb process and with Alex renting that space, it's really helped me realize that we're actually giving something to the community. I mean, the feedback that we get from our guests and the joy that they have to be able to stay in that area and be in a beautiful house in a great area. And now Alex, he's now offering his service to the community in a perfect location. So mountain bikers in that area now have that shop they can go to. We're helping him expand his business. And that's felt really good, I think, to see the contribution to the community that this venture that we started is actually produced.
Yeah, it's beyond money, right? It's rewarding. You know, it's like there's bigger meaning to it, which has been really nice. And I could say the same thing for Pearl Street, like providing like a good place for people to live and such has been really nice. And at the end of the day, you're working with people, right? And I think that if people know that you care and like you're trying to do the right thing, they're gonna like working with you if you treat them well. And I feel like that's kind of been a collective mission between the three of us through all these, and it's worked out pretty well for us. And we're still only a few years in. We just hit 3 years with owning that property, and I feel like that's for the first time. I feel like this year, like it's just kind of like we have some smaller projects we're gonna do, but for the most part, I feel like it's just running pretty good this year, and we almost like don't want to disrupt the flow because we're a super host. We've collected. We have a perfect 5-star rating, and
knock on wood
there. And I feel like I'll go back a little bit. While you were doing a lot of that renovation work, Marc and I had to figure out how to run an Airbnb business, right?
Yeah.
Like we were kind of getting all the. We were professional shoppers for a while. We were doing like 3 or 4 hour sessions with a screen share on Amazon. And I remember going to Target with you that first time, and we were trying to decide like what pillowcases and what towels to get. And it was like the worst experience ever.
Was that the time it was just me and you? Or I think I went once when
I think Sydney came once, and then I think
your
Kelly
wife
came.
Yeah, that was a big help.
Yeah, it was. We quickly identified that. Because you're furnishing a house, like it has to have. You're looking for something that's going to last a long time because it's a commercial use, but it also has to be comfortable and stylish and all that stuff. And the amount of research we had to do to like narrow down like the types of sheets we were getting, and the blankets and the pillowcases and the all that stuff was it was a lot of work, and all the the bureaus and the bed frames, and because we were basically. That was quite an expense. We were buying 7 beds, and all the sheet sets and the comforters, and what do we end up getting? Duvet covers. I didn't know what the heck a duvet cover was. right?
A lot of learning.
Definitely a lot of learning. And just so the readers know, we converted that house into a 5-bedroom. So it's a pretty, it's not overly big, but it's about 2,000 square feet now. We added 400 or 500 square feet. And we added a bedroom, and so it's 5 bedrooms. So just furnishing that many bedrooms and having multiple, because you have to have backups for each bed. And so I think there's 7 beds in 5 bedrooms. So we have 14, sheet sets and duvet covers, and just, it was a lot.
Yeah, it's funny too because, you think about certain things and they're not that expensive individually, but when you have to multiply everything by 7 or 5, it's like, oh man, so, we need a couple lamps. Well, no, we need 2 lamps for every bedroom, it's like all of a sudden things start to add up. So it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it added up a lot. And then even just like the messaging, you're trying to anticipate. And fortunately, Marc and I, we had this experience with Cooptopia with the customers, and you're trying to deliver an experience. You're competing with hotels in a sense. So hotels are pretty good at accommodating people, but we're trying to do this for the first time. So it was, the messaging when we welcome guests and anticipating, every question that they might have, and sending messages out at the right time. That was all kind of new for us to learn that experience. That's worked out pretty good for us, but we were kind of learning on the job again, those first few guests, right?
Yeah, but I think having the right mindset is so important. I think we all had the mindset of trying to give the guests a good experience, and that was kind of the way we were thinking. And I think some tips we can give, I think there's a lot of things that we did right. First off, I think you guys did a great job on the welcome guide. So if you're out there listening and you're thinking about doing an Airbnb, having a really strong welcome guide is huge. So this gives the guest all the information they might need to know right up front, so they don't have to ask a million questions. So everything's right there. We did a couple other cool things. So obviously we're in an area that's big on mountain biking. So we have this back porch, and we turned a big section of the back porch into basically a little bike shop. So we have a little workbench. We've got some common tools. We've got a bike rack, air compressor. I think guests really appreciate things like that. We had a big map of the trails printed out, and we have it framed in the living room so that, they can kind of spend some time mapping out where they want to go ride. So I think just kind of being cognizant of what your guest is looking for and trying to go above and beyond to deliver an experience is really going to pay off for you in the end if you're offering short-term rentals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any of the things that we've gone a little bit above on has come back, tenfold for us with, good reviews and good feedback. And I mean, most of our guests now are second, third time coming through, right?
Yep.
So it's what was fearful that first year is now it's almost like routine. It's just coming through again. And I think that you constantly have to improve, right? If at one point, things are going to have to be replaced and such. So it's you try to get ahead of it before it does. Things like the washer and dryer, right? Something that we didn't really quite think of is, well, hey, it takes a lot of work for a washer and dryer to do 7 beds at the same time. So we switched from kind of residential, typical washer dryer to getting speed queens.
Yep.
And we haven't had one complaint from Melissa since we've switched.
Right.
So little adjustments like that have been good. But yeah, for the most part, I'd say for the first time in a while, I don't think we have major projects going for the properties this year. And I feel like depending on what we do at Pearl Street right now, we might consider selling it and doing our first 1031 exchange this year, where we try to look for maybe a bigger property or a commercial property. But I think looking back on, now 12 years of experience, I feel like real estate, the good has outweighed the bad.
Yep.
It's been good for our personal financial situations. We've benefited from asset appreciation and tax write-offs. We've learned a ton. I think just being in the industry, and look, we're small fish in the grand scheme of things. We're not. There's not fortune articles being written about us, but I feel like this has been a lot of fun too. We've been able to provide, real estate for people to live in or to come into our area, and it's benefited us, in our personal situations as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to maybe do a follow-up, at some point down the road of what comes from here. But I've been wanting to get the 3 of us together to do this for a little while. So would you guys have any tips or advice for people looking to get started in real estate from what we've learned from it?
I mean, I'd say it's pretty cliche, but if we can do it, you can do it. You know what I mean? I think we touched on this, it's just about having faith in yourself and trusting that it's possible and that you'll be able to figure out the problems and the issues and make things work. It's really just about having the right mindset. If you're buying multifamily or you're trying to do an Airbnb, just keep your guests in mind, keep your tenants in mind, and if you're focused on that, it can work for you for sure.
Absolutely. How about you, Marc?
I'll say, one thing I'd recommend, is just constantly be learning. I think all of us, we listen to podcasts. There's a podcast called Bigger Pockets.
Yep.
Has a lot of real estate advice. So I really got into podcasts when we kind of started going down the short-term rent. So there's a lot of short-term rental podcasts out there. There's a lot of, podcasts about multifamily or single family. And to this day, I still listen to these podcasts, and you can always pick up new stuff. So constantly, I think be learning is probably a big one for me, and then just get started. So many people I feel are kind of on the fence and they just never get started. And your first investment, maybe you'll just break even. Maybe you won't make a lot of money, but it's the learning that comes with that's going to pay dividends for you in the future. Yeah. So again, you might, don't look to, if you wait to, think, oh, I want to hit a home run first up at bat. Again, you're probably going to keep waiting and waiting. That's what a lot of people do. But you know what? Just go hit a single, and what you're going to learn along the way is going to get you to the, sooner or later you'll start hitting doubles and hit triples and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, you got to be in the game, right?
In the game.
I mean, how many YouTube videos have we watched on, whether it's repair work or strategy or, there's someone out there, whatever unique problem that we've come across, there's likely someone out there who's faced the same problem and has documented it, either in a Reddit forum or a YouTube video or on Bigger Pockets. And you don't want to face problems, but they're all learning opportunities, right? Yeah. And it's you start to realize that there's a lot of fear of getting in and what could go wrong, right? But like we had a pipe burst, right, on Valentine's Day. I think it was 2015 or 16. It was probably the best case scenario pipe burst, but it's like you figure it out. It's like you address the problem. You just trust yourself to address it as good as possible. And if you can't fix it, well, hey, sorry, tenants, we're going to call a plumber and we're going to get them there as soon as possible, right? And that's all you can really do. So I feel like the worst case scenarios aren't as bad as you think they're going to be. And what you don't know, you can learn, right?
Exactly.
And it's just you got to come across the situations and trust yourself in those situations. So, I think that real estate's done really well for us, and it's leveraged into many different business situations and work and career situations. There's been a lot of personal growth, I feel like, for us through it all as well.
Yeah, and maybe next episode we'll be talking about how there's opportunities in every market, because looking back, it kind of feels like things were a little bit on easy mode with interest rates and stuff, and it's a very different market now, but we're still out there looking for opportunities. I think we're all kind of feeling ready to take on the next project, and it's definitely a different market now. It's a little more difficult, but I think there are opportunities in every market, and we're turning over every stone and trying to see what's out there. So
yeah, I feel like the headlines and such, they cause inaction. Mm-hmm. And if you really want something, like sometimes you need to tell like everyone that you're looking to buy a house, and you'll find something off the market that isn't as crazy expensive. And yeah, interest rates have changed a little bit, but you still can make it work if you want to, and maybe interest rates will drop down the road and you can refinance and get a lower interest rate, but you'll still benefit from owning, right? So it's, I agree. I do feel very happy that we bought when we did. I would not necessarily want to start right now, but 20 years from now, I would have been happy that I bought right now too. Because more than likely than not, real estate's going to be worth a lot more 10 years from now, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, right? So it's like it's kind of like the whole when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago or right now?
Exactly.
Well, when's a good time to invest in real estate? 20 years ago or right now?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I definitely would encourage anyone still to pursue it. There's still, you can do other stuff like invest in the S&P and be more passive and do well. Right now, you can get a good return on a treasury note and, good, boring, basic, no risk investments and such. But it's everyone's got different goals. I personally would be very bored. I feel like having these challenges and such has been really fun and interesting.
Yeah, and your stocks aren't going to tell you how great of a weekend they had at the trails and that they can't wait to come back. So there's some reward there as well. I think it's important.
Yeah. I'll say too that like for me personally, I got into real estate to diversify. So I think it's a great way. A great thing for people to, like again, I was kind of always stock market, kind of heavy with, my last 20, 25 years. So real estate, I think has been a great sort of way to diversify sort of your portfolio. And like you said, a great point about the gratification that you can get. It's really been nice.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's it. I appreciate you coming on, Chris. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm sure we'll have some more conversations like this down the road.
Yeah, this was great, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining the podcast, everyone. We'll be putting some more notes in from the conversation on some before and after pictures of some of the properties and such, and some of our associated courses with investing in real estate. So thanks for joining.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.